Hi, welcome back to another edition of Green TV. I bring my favorite green solutionaries on this program, and you're about to meet one. Karl Warkomski. I'm going to give just a very brief bio here. Let's see, you are a biologist, a business owner. You grew up in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania, and you went to UC Irvine out in California and USC for graduate work. And you were an elected official for 7 years, an executive director of a nonprofit for 2, currently manufacturing bioconversion technologies in North Carolina. And when I asked, what is that? Let's see, bioconversion technologies, that's a fancy word for compost.
Composting.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite things to talk about because a rind is a terrible thing to waste. And so are coffee grounds or tea bags and eggshells and all the things that when I travel, I can't compost, and it's physically painful for me. You can probably relate.
Absolutely. All of the above needs to go diverted from the waste stream.
And it's such an easy, fun thing to do. I realize not everybody can, but I'm talking to you from a rental apartment in Manhattan. And yes, it's a green building, fairly new one. We compost here. So if you can do it in the middle of New York City, you can do it anywhere, right? Pretty much.
Yes, it just has to become habitual with everyone. And once
exactly.
You get on that, just like brushing your teeth.
Right. And we're going to talk about compost, but we're also going to talk about climate change and the bigger picture and everything in between that we find relevant to this conversation, because I just like the way you see things and the way you express yourself. So let's see if we can tap into some of that wisdom. I'm sure we can. Begin by telling me what you'd like our viewers to know. What's something that you bring to this conversation that you don't hear every place else?
Well, I want them to compost, first of all, because everybody eats and everybody creates food waste. And it really is the low-hanging fruit when it comes to
and vegetables.
Climate impacts and trying to mitigate those impacts. It really is substantial. And if you are familiar with the book Drawdown by Paul Hawken, it is one of those impacts that's significant and can be done easily without much fanfare. And you can do it in an apartment, you can do it in a house, you can do it in any type of domicile. You can use a service, you can do it at home, you can do it with your neighbors. And it's so easy and it is fun. And I want to encourage everybody to think about their food waste that's generated, whether eating out, they're eating at friends, or they're eating at home. All of that has to be diverted from the waste stream.
And even though it may not be obvious, there is a connection to climate change.
Huge. When food waste goes to landfill, it gets buried underneath other garbage, and it starts to break down anaerobically without oxygen. When that happens, methane's produced, and that methane escapes into the atmosphere, and that impacts the atmosphere several magnitudes worse than CO2. Even though it doesn't last in the atmosphere as long, it is more potent. Mm-hmm. So if we can eliminate that from happening in the first place, we're in a good place. And you can do things like get free soil out of this too. So it's not just you're doing something to help the big picture, you're also doing something to help your plants.
Also, if you throw your food in the garbage, it needs to be trucked using gasoline to the landfill. So you're saving in so many ways. And it's just natural, literally.
Granted, the worst impact is sending the food waste to the landfill. The second worst is having it picked up by a diesel service, which is still better than going to the landfill. But the best is to do it at home or with your neighbor or inside. You don't have to have a yard. You can do it anaerobically using fermentation like bokashi. A lot of the Japanese and Koreans have little home systems. They put all their food waste in there, breaks down anaerobically through fermentation. You don't need a yard to compost.
I've been asked, well, what's the difference if your food, is composted in a bin, in your driveway versus landfill? Isn't it going to release methane either way? And you would
there's a distinct difference. When it breaks down without oxygen, you get methane. When it breaks down in the presence of oxygen, you get CO2. But that CO2 is also along with sequestering the carbon in the dirt, which is humus. The compost material that's finished that you can use in your garden, you're locking in the compost, you're locking in the carbon in that compost. So you're sequestering it that way. Yes, there is CO2 breaking down because anytime there's metabolic activity of microbes, you're going to have a release, but it's CO2, it's not as potent as methane. So you want to have the CO2 done first.
So we're composting in Texas, and we did in California. How is it? I mean, and yet I still have some basic questions, and you're the person to ask everything you want to know about composting. Where do those worms come from that I didn't put in there, but crawl out when it rains?
The worms are usually native species found in your local environment. Everybody has their own species of segmented annelids, which are just a nice way of saying earthworms. And they usually find their way into your bin through the nooks and crannies, and they love food waste. They love decomposing organic waste, leaves, paper, whatever you're putting in there. They're going to consume it over time. And certain worms target certain waste streams, like redworms, which a lot of people have heard of, are really good with food waste, but not all food waste, but a lot of food waste. And then earthworms and night crawlers can have different segments of the food waste stream. It just depends on what you're going to be doing. And we use a different species of native arthropods called black soldier flies. That's what inhabits our technology.
There is something almost physically satisfying about bringing your compost, your food scraps, out into a bin, in our case on the driveway, and just dumping it and knowing it's going to shrink down. You know, I mean, it just feels so, I hate wasting food to begin with, but even the scraps I hate to waste, but it's really one of those, like you said, it's fun, it's easy ways to be part of the solution.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're a garden addict and love plants, it really is one of those gateway drugs to start growing your own
I understand
yummy
that.
veggies on your property or on your balcony or windowsill. It's a lot of fun to have the plants living in the soil that you created.
It's so rich, right? It's like liquid gold or soil gold or something.
Liquid gold is a great way of saying it. Yes.
Even though it's not really liquid, but it really is that valuable, right? For as far as soil amendment.
Well, the plants definitely think so.
Yes, they do. And they should know. They have their own intelligence. They don't have to listen to us or explain it to us. Okay, so composting is a key thing that people can do. And any idea what percentage of Americans are composting at home or in their community gardens or workplace? Roughly?
My guess is it's still under 10%. And so we have a lot of opportunity. Granted, there have been a lot of services that just popped up, like Compost Now, which is a great service in a lot of cities. And I know they have one in Austin. I know they have one in the Bay Area. Actually, there's several in the Bay Area. So that will start to change people's viewpoint of what they should be doing with their kitchen scraps. And, you know, it's not just the kitchen scraps, like I said, at your home. It's also when you go out to dinner. You would either have those diverted to a particular service, or you bring them home to then either use.
People actually do that. See, even I haven't done that. I bring any leftovers home and I eat it the next day. I won't waste food. I can't.
That's the best thing to do, is to use them, not to waste. And sometimes just learning the tricks of not producing waste in the first place is half the responsibility. But you know, you get very frugal when it comes to waste. When you start diverting your waste, you start thinking about the creation of it, and you do more and are more inclined to not produce the waste in the first place. So I think it actually takes you to another level of waste responsibility.
Food waste is what got me into this. It was my gateway drug, if you will, way back.
Really?
When people say, how did you get this way, Betsy? Was it your parents? I said, no. I remember in third or so grade, maybe second grade, call me a freak, you will when you hear this, but a good one. I remember being viscerally upset when I would see my fellow students throw away their lunches untouched. Like, how can you do that? That's good food, and your mommy made it for you. And I just was sad, you know, and I never understood that. And I grew up to just absolutely abhor food waste. And that's before I even knew, you know, what it was causing in terms of methane gas release. It just seemed wrong that, you know, something so precious as food, while so many people are hungry, to be throwing it away mindlessly. And so, call me strange, but I guess that's where it started, that green gene. How can we clone this green gene? That's what I want to know.
Well, the instinctual tendencies that you have, that's kind of just were in you and innate, are not common. And people have to be incentivized to do these things. I try and encourage my friends in my circle and sphere by giving them certain tools. I'll give them the little scrap carriers made out of stainless steel, which are going to last a long time because they're stainless steel, for basically putting their food waste into a device in order to take out to the compost bin. So those are the types of things I give to encourage. Sometimes I'll give them a pile turner, which is one of those devices with the wings at the tip that folds shut when you plunge it into the pile. And when you pull it back out, they open up and it allows you to churn the pile vertically, introducing oxygen into the pile and also bringing the stuff from the outside in. So there's just little things that I give to encourage people, because you don't want them to have a bad experience. You don't want them to say, look, this doesn't work. What am I doing wrong? I'm going to give up. No, you want to give them tools. Just like if you're a jogger, you're not going to give somebody flip-flops. You want to give them the right shoes so that they enjoy the recreational aspect. Compost is a recreational aspect of gardening, and it's fun. They have to have the right tools.
So a lot of people say, especially in Texas, when I suggest composting, oh, we don't want to attract animals. What do you say to that?
I agree. And so if there is an animal issue, you have to have certain protocols in place to not encourage attracting those animals. So if you have an open compost bin that's going to encourage animals, then don't put meats and fats in there, because that's what entices them a lot. Stick with the veggie matters. Obviously put your yard waste in there and other things. And if you do have something that you think is going to entice the critters, put it in the center and cover it so that they can't really get in through the thicket of yard debris. There are tricks, but you will attract critters if you put anything out in your yard that's easily accessible. So sometimes the technology has to reflect accessibility.
So our compost bin, it looks just like a garbage can, really. It's closed. There's a lock, so they couldn't get into it. But would just smelling it attract?
They are attracted by the smell of waste breaking down, putrescent waste. They are attracted to that, and they're going to come from quite a distance. And it's not just the mesopredators like the raccoons and skunks and opossums. You will get nuisance flies, like the pest flies, like house flies.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to accept that it's the responsibility of the composter to make sure that you don't make it easy to access the waste.
Okay, this is getting a little personal, but I bet I'm not the only one. We did get a problem with fleas, like so many bugs, flies, whatever, but it had a top on it. But when we open it to put the food scraps in, phew, what are we doing wrong to create
The
something?
trick with the pest flies is they tend to only want to lay eggs directly on the food waste. So if you have what's called a topper, or maybe a piece of moist cardboard that kind of fits the inside surface where it's actually touching the waste, it kind of serves as a blockade without suffocating. Toppers are very common in the UK. It is an old piece of felt or wool that is breathable and lets oxygen and moisture through, but is a barrier to flies.
Is cardboard breathable?
It is and isn't. It depends on how thick the cardboard is. I tell people just a piece of cardboard that acts as a shield is a pretty good way of mitigating the house flies. But I always tell people get old fabric like wool, like an old wool blanket or an old wool sweater that's no longer used, cut it up, and that's the topper. And it's going to last a while because that stuff is resistant to breaking down more so than like piece of cardboard.
But just because I want this to be educational, since we've gone this far with the details, thank you for anyone watching who wants to learn how to do this properly. That means you have to lift up the topper before you put the food scraps in. So it's got to be something that's like in one piece that you can.
Yeah, it's if you can just envision a square of old fabric that looks like maybe a piece of old blanket, that works really well. And it's not just good, Betsy, for keeping the flies at bay. It also holds in heat. It also allows oxygen to go through and allows moisture to go through. So there's like, a quadruple whammy of benefits.
Okay, so worms are good, flies are not in your compost.
Certain flies. There are certain flies that are beneficial, that are not vectors for humans. They don't carry or transmit disease and will actually help speed up the process of breakdown. Believe it or not, the beneficial flies do exist. They are like the soldier flies, the black soldier fly, the golden soldier fly. In fact, that is the biological engine in a lot of the technologies that we manufacture.
So I did not stand there and look closely at the flies. I ran the other way, dump and run. Is there a point where if there's too many flies, that's a sign of a problem, regardless of what they are?
There usually are populations commensurate with the quantity of food waste. So they don't tend to overpopulate because then they know there's not enough food. So with black soldier fly, each case of eggs can be between 400 and 900 eggs. And so you're going to get a lot of flies very quickly. But they are a beneficial fly that actually gets rid of your waste much faster than by composting. They're actually quicker than the microbes. But if it's a pest fly, like a house fly, you run the risk of disease.
Plus, when you open up the bin, it's not pleasant to get an onslaught of flies coming in.
No, I always tell people, unless you know what you're doing, it's best to just block all the fly species.
Okay, good to know. So let's pivot a bit and kind of, 30,000 foot view and zoom out, zoom in on zooming out.
While we're on Zoom.
Yeah. Why do you care so much about the planet, the climate, everything that's kind of collapsing in terms of ecosystems?
How you said you had an innate interest and concern about food waste? I can't explain to you why I care a lot about nature and biodiversity. It's just inherent in me. I think E.O. Wilson, who just passed away recently, called it biophilia. And you have just kind of an innate tendency to want to protect what is living, biological, and of this earth. And it's kind of like why I like to eat certain things. I can't explain to you why I like them. It's just inherent in me. And it always has been. It's just I've been trying to direct it to more productive purposes. And I think the most productive purpose right now is to focus on the climate and solutions that will help.
Right now, we're not in a very good place. It's 2022 and we can't even get Build Back Better passed. And that's just like the bare minimum of legislation we need to create the climate action infrastructure. How do you keep your hopes up, or don't you? That's okay too. Especially since we haven't done so well with dealing with COVID, which, while very, very serious and yes, deadly, is easier to manage, mostly with masks and vaccines, if people would do that, than climate and ocean collapse and all the other interconnected web of life systems that are not in great shape.
Mental health management is, I think, key to being in this sphere. I think there's two ways that I personally alleviate the low-level depression that can creep up in everybody. Number one, I go out in nature and embrace it. So we have a very robust, large garden that distracts me from the day-to-day reality. So combining and bonding with nature. And then number two, and I think this is one that is kind of different than bonding with nature, is we're all going to have to face the reality that we're going to have extreme weather events. And I don't want my family to be unprepared. So having infrastructure that prepares me for problematic weather situations or possibly climate crisis, also gives me some comfort and ease. So we have emergency supplies in case there's a weather event, and that is also helps with mental stability. So those two things.
Action. And don't you wish everybody had that green gene that we got? Some of us do have it bad. And
I like that, the green gene.
The green gene, or I call it the extra W chromosome for waste prevention gene, because it's just like the concept of waste just bothers me for what is precious resources. And, they can't speak for themselves, say, save me, preserve me, if only. So those of us who notice it need to speak up, and there's more and more of us, certainly. But in many ways, it seems like we're not winning this most epic of wars, a war against ourselves, to preserve the future for our children and beyond. I've heard you speak quite eloquently in some of the rooms about what you wish or what you don't understand, or something to that effect.
I do think it's incumbent upon those of us who have an innate love for nature to help others fall in love with nature and fall in love with the biosphere. And the reason I think that's important is when you fall in love with something, you're going to do more to protect it. So I try to introduce people to nature in the myriad of ways that I can locally do that. So number one, I get as many people as I can to garden and fall in love with that. I get as many people as I can to attend what I call interpretive hikes into the environment, into nature, to get them to explore their thoughts when they're out in the wilderness and teach them a little bit about what they're looking at. And then number three is to make sure that they understand the beauty of their communities is important. And so we do litter cleanup. So those types of three are introductions I have in my local community to get others enthusiastic about a relationship with Mother Earth. And I'm convinced that that is a good recipe for success.
One of the interviews that had the biggest impact on me, and I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds formerly on radio, was with a gentleman, I believe his name is Richard Louv, and it was a book, Last Tree in the Woods, I believe. And it was about, how we've lost in a generation or two, our relationship with nature, where I grew up being able to run around, and I grew up in walnut orchards in Silicon Valley, Santa Clara Valley before it was Silicon Valley. Wow. And, just like nature and going down to the creek and watching the little tadpoles turn into baby frogs. And it's like my favorite memory of childhood. And my daughter, she ran around outside, but she had to go to camp in Maine to do that because even Miss, Green Mama would not be comfortable letting her go outside and run around, unsupervised, till after dark, just that in one generation, look what has changed. And the whole concept of shifting baseline, how you don't know what you're missing because you didn't experience it. And with each successive generation, we're losing that collective memory of what's gone and how dangerous that is, because like you said, you can't say what you don't love, and don't do it because I told you to do it. You really do need to fall in love with nature. And there's so much to fall in love with, but yet these kids today, more screens than ever and not enough running around outside. I think that's really a trend that is very disturbing to me. I'm sure you too.
I think what you were talking about in our inherent love with the green gene maybe was activated by our experiences as children and being accessible to nature. I had a similar experience that you just described growing up in the mountains. It was very rural, very rich when it came to creeks, streams, mountains, forests, just the vibrancy of life. And I think that triggered the inherent gene that was already existing. And maybe the gene is more common than we think. We just have to trigger it in others.
I like that. And you're certainly doing your part. But that shifting baseline concept scares me, because if you don't know what you're missing, you won't fight for it. And we need it more than ever in these very stressful, chaotic times. Nature, right? It's the best stress reliever there is. And yet at the same time, we're despoiling Mother Nature, whether intentionally or not. So it's kind of a double whammy, isn't it? And it would be a win-win-win if we could do a better job of preserving.
It's going to present itself as an enormous issue when it comes to the climate crisis and mental health. It could get severe in this country, and we're going to have to make sure we manage that effectively.
Don't you think we're seeing the beginnings of that now with people?
Yes, I do. I think there's a lot of anxiety around the climate right now, and I think it's going to accelerate as these weather events become more extreme, like what happened in Colorado. Oh my
Kentucky,
God.
Colorado,
British Columbia.
I know. Portland. I mean, it's just insane. And, young women are deciding to not have children, in part because of what's happening to our environment, our climate. And that should be Stop the Press's news. That's why this should be on every news channel all the time, or a lot more than it is. It's impacting people's lives. And so, it's already begun. And the other thing that's begun is this shift from problem to, oh, it's too late, so there's no point in doing anything, that being just like helpless and giving up. defeatist. And in the 20 years that I've been talking about this and doing media and trying to get more people to pay attention, these are critical 2 decades that we just lost on the climate front. It's so maddening to think that we've squandered precious time and energy, and we're still doing it. I mean, look at what's happening in DC, political gridlock and polarization, and, have different opinions on any number of subjects, but not, the environment, our environment. I don't even like to say the environment, let's own it. Try going without food, air, or water if you don't think it's important. If you think we don't need Mother Nature, she doesn't need us, that's for sure. So yeah, I think it's beginning to happen, and I fear that it's accelerating so rapidly, and the impacts are so dramatic that people will just like hands off. There's nothing I can do, and that's what we've got to fight. We need to empower, engage, and really point out what giving up really looks like. Is failure really an option if you're a parent and you have children you love more than life, or grandchildren? Not to mention beyond that, and even if you're not a parent, nieces, nephews, pets, parks, your community, this precious planet. And so like sometimes I think, yeah, this is so hard what we have to do, especially with these political forces and special interests, dragging us backwards. It would still be an epic challenge. But when I think about just if we lose the will to do it, but the only thing harder than doing it is not doing it, and the harsh future that will ensure, and surviving that.
Sometimes I think about the opposition, the disinformation, and I think to myself, do these people not realize they share the same planet and ecosystem with us? And if it collapses, they cease to exist just like us. And granted, I'm sure there's some sociopaths out there that want something bad to happen, but I'm betting that for the most part, most people aren't like that. And we have a shared responsibility to direct our future in a way that's going to continue not only our species, but the tens of millions of other species that have a right to live and exist on this planet, and that have absolutely no say in any of this. Exactly. So I can't change a global leader's view on this, but I can work on my local community and try to accelerate interest, enrich the knowledge. And we have a climate forum coming up that we're hosting around Earth Day in my local community. We found a local climatologist. He's going to speak on it. And you know what? Again, we're just going to continue to engage the community in the best ways I know how. And I think that's incumbent upon all of us to just reach out locally.
And to vote at any level, local, regional, national, especially national, vote only for candidates who understand science and have plans and programs that they want to implement from the start. Like President Biden.
I just tell people to vote for the climate party.
Exactly. That should say it all. And yet President Biden gets it, and he's tried, but he's been thwarted at every turn by the other party that want him to fail at any cost. Future be damned, children, grandchildren, apparently doesn't matter as much as their own party's success. How can you, there's no good party on a bad planet. There's no good anything on a bad planet. It just is so maddening, isn't it?
Sometimes I think about if I was in that position, I don't know if I could hold it together as well as a lot of our leaders do. Yeah. These are almost insurmountable odds that are on par with Hannibal. And you look at what they're doing and I think, my God, how do they not get frustrated? But they hold their composure. They keep moving forward. They understand the obstacles. And I think a lot of them are doing their best. I think they just are finding difficult because there's too much opposition. I just don't think there's a lot of collaboration that's necessary. It's too much competition.
Some would say, including me some days, they're being too patient, Biden and Harris, and they're trying to, I know what they're trying to do politically. They don't want to alienate Manchin and Sinema, but my God, this has dragged on for months and they're still being very polite. And I think it's time. I was hoping that Biden was really going to start speaking out more and getting angry more, like that when the day he spoke on January 6th, the anniversary of the insurrection, about really, this is what Trump, we almost lost democracy. We came this close. Get that way on climate,
We just have to stay positive and believe that they know what they're doing, because we can't decompose into paralysis. We have to believe
Yeah,
that
we can't be
they
like
are.
compost.
We have exactly, but we have to believe that they're doing what is necessary, or all of this is for naught. I mean, I believe in our leadership. I really do.
I believe they're trying to do the right thing. I believe that one party is a big obstacle, and because they just want to see failure and they don't think about the consequences. I really do. I mean, not all of them, but the ones that, look, how many Republicans voted for Build Back Better? I mean, there's something really wrong, really, what's the word? A lot of those D words come up, dinosaur. Something just really is wrong. It's just wrong. And
I don't like the competition. I would rather see collaboration. And I think that politics in America has gotten very toxic, and it is causing problems, especially when it's pertaining to existential threats where we need everybody on board. Again, this is not going to be a selective crisis with just red or blue states. It's actually going to affect all of us.
it already is.
And it already is. I mean, my God, I think for what we are now committed with the emissions at the levels they are, even if we were stopped today, we're expecting already 75 feet of sea level rise, just based on what's been released already.
Meanwhile, we're still subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, which is, fueling our demise. And we're part of it because we don't have a lot of options. So yeah, deranged was the word I was looking for.
You know what? A lonely impulse of delight hit me today on my way back from a meeting, and it was a Tesla, compact Tesla pulling a trailer. I had not seen that yet. And I thought, you know what? Whoever owns that Tesla is expanding its range of functionality, and I love that. And it was just, he had some garden tools on it and some other devices, and I'm thinking, this is fantastic.
Well, because other people will see it and go, oh, so they're not wimpy electric vehicles.
No, and that was a robust 4x7 trailer. So
yeah, I mean, there's so much. All anyone need do is take a test drive of any electric car. It doesn't even have to be a Tesla. It's quiet, it's clean, it's a mean driving machine, except it's nice. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to drive a Tesla 3, and I can't imagine getting any other car. I absolutely love it. And
I
it
think
was $35,000, not prohibitive.
We're going to have a huge range of electric options over the next 5 years, and it's going to be exciting. The technology is going to accelerate, and we're going to look back a few years from now and say, oh my God, remember when we were burning hydrocarbons to move our stuff around?
And killed off the electric car, really? We had to kill it to bring it back?
I mean, even if you don't have an understanding in climate change, you do understand that a lot of these carbon fuels are finite resources, and we're going to have to switch away from them anyway, just because there's a limited amount of them. And the only way to have a society last longer is to have a renewable source of energy.
And yet the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. This is often said.
Exactly.
Well, I could go on, Karl, but I'll let you get to the rest of your evening. And I want to thank you for your comments. If there's any parting thoughts, anything you'd like to ask our viewers to do, now's your chance.
If people have any interest whatsoever in bioconversion or black soldier flies, please reach out. I'd be glad to help them set up their home units, or tell them a little bit about our technology. Or if they're in North Carolina and want to see it firsthand, I always love meeting people, other people who care about the planet as much as we do.
And how about if they want to start a Compost Now program in their city?
I could give them some leads on doing that. It's becoming more common.
Which should make it easier, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just look at the structure that worked. Well, wonderful chatting with you. You always cheer me up, and we all need that. We need to do that for each other, right?
Yes, thank you, Betsy. And thank you for all you do with Green TV. It's so exciting. I was so excited when I went to your homepage for the first time and saw all of the interviewees and all of the different topics. It's well organized, and you could spend a little bit too much time while you're working at the office on your website. It's a little addictive.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm happy to hear that. And if you would like, and we're going to organize it better. This is just the beginning. I've only been doing interviews since September, but we have very grand plans. We're a tiny operation with some very dedicated volunteers, but we want to go 24/7. Why the heck not? What's more important than this? But if you really want to be impressed, because I got no pay for 25 years of doing these interviews with you solutionaries. That's my passion. But I have archives. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of radio interviews on betsyrosenberg.com under archives. In fact, there's a link on our website, Betsy's radio interviews. And in my darkest days, I go look at that and I go, I can't believe I did that. And that was 12, 15 years ago, you know, and had people like Michael Mann and Catherine Hayhoe. That was like 10, 12 years ago. But before they were CNN's favorite people, you know, they were mine. Very proud of that. But beyond the big climate stories and the obvious climate scientists, there's so many, you know, ordinary folks doing extraordinary environmental work. And I think we should shine the spotlight on you and share the knowledge and tap into your wisdom. If not now, when? So thank you for what you're doing, Karl. And yeah, let people know about Green TV. We really want to be there for those who are curious, concerned, and just need more, want to know more. And it's hard to find that in one place. And we really want to be that platform. And you don't have to read a whole book or watch a whole documentary. Just tune in for a 20, 30-minute, you know, interview. And you don't have to eat, as cute as you are, you don't even have to watch. You can just listen while you're cooking dinner or doing something else, multitask, and your eco IQ will go up, I promise. And someday when we have cocktail parties to go to again, you can impress your friends and, you know, neighbors by showing that you know what black fly, whatever you said.
Oh, black soldier fly, yeah.
Black soldier flies are. I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. We need to, you know, be better eco stewards in this country and in this world. So thanks for your part in doing that.
Of course, and thank you, Betsy.
Go forth and greenify. See you next time.